Good evening and greetings, Earthlings. We shall now discuss Lemuria, Atlantis, and the ancient mystery schools. When the Anunnaki arrived on Earth 480,000 years ago, there were several races living there. These were the Lemurians, the etheric Syrians in animal bodies, the reptiles, the descendants of those who went underground after Tiamat was destroyed, and the evolving human primates. The human primates were the ones seeded by the felines after the destruction of Tiamat, and when the Anunnaki came down, they were at the stage of Homo erectus. They were telepathic, intelligent, and benevolent toward the other animals in the wild. The Lemurian civilization posed as the mother colony to Yu and Atlantis, two other civilizations coexisting at the time. These empires were started by Ashen, Yu, and Alta, Atlantis, two relatives of Anu who arrived on Earth after the destruction of Hyperborean. Yu was a colony of Orientals, and Atlantis was a colony of red-skinned humans, Native Americans today. Each of these three civilizations, Lemuria, Atlantis, and Yu, started in Lyra as white-skinned human colonies, and each had their DNA altered by the felines in order for them to survive in the varying environmental conditions on Earth. The humans on Earth, now with red, yellow, or brown skin, are descendants from these three civilizations. The black race was brought here from another star nation. The white race on Earth was installed here by the royal house of Avion on Nibiru, which sent the Anunnaki down for two reasons. One, mine gold to be placed in the force field around Nibiru and create the two-strand DNA physical vehicles for the Earth Syrians. These two operations went hand in hand, as the gold would end up being mined by the worker class created with the two-stranded DNA bodies, a cross between the primates and the Nibiruans. Since there was a relatively large reptilian population on Earth at the time, the Nibiruans knew a truce had to be made before they could commence mining. To satisfy this pact, Anu married Dramin, the dragon queen of Tiamat, who fled to Nibiru after the destruction. Enki was born to the pair, becoming a half-human, half-dragon. When it was all settled, Enki was the first to land on Earth, along with several other Anunnaki who set up mining operations. Enki built the city called Eridu, which was known as Earth Station 1, a place where space shuttles could land and retrieve the mined gold. Anu's daughter, Ninhursag, arrived on Earth next and accommodated the workers mining the gold with medical attention. Shortly after that, Anu arrived with Enlil. Enlil was the heir to the Nibiru at that time. If you are a scholar of ancient Sumer, you might recognize this story from the Enuma Elish, the Sumerian epic of cremation, found transcribed on clay tablets. Yes, the Sumerian epic of creation, the Enuma Elish. As tensions among the Anunnaki escalated, it became apparent that the gold was not being mined fast enough, as members aboard Nibiru were dying due to exposure. Extensive gold mines were found in Africa, but they were underground, meaning more tireless work was required from the miners. Pressure between Enki and Enlil sought to divide the Anunnaki as well, since Enki felt he deserved command of Earth over Enlil, as he had toiled relentlessly to build Eridu and extract the gold. From the point of view of the Earth reptilians, they felt Enki deserved the post, as well as because he was the son of the Earth's dragon queen and was therefore viewed as the rightful heir. The rest of the reptilians residing on Earth claimed their own inheritance of the planet, giving their creation myth as substantiation. By Palladian law, Enlil was the rightful heir to the Nibiru and Earth, since he was the son of Anu and Antu, a human. To settle the dispute, both Enki and Enlil drew straws, metaphorically speaking. The continent of Africa was given to Enki as Enlil inherited the remainder of Earth. The Anunnaki were moved to Africa to mine there, but there was another problem. Alau's grandson, Kumarbi, was harboring some animosity toward Anu and his children, since it was Anu who took control of Nibiru after Alalu stepped down and not Kumarbi. The Igigi, Kumarbi's followers, waged war against Anu's grandson Ninurta and many others, and was subsequently defeated. Again, you might recognize the parallels to Mesopotamian stories, especially Hittite and Akkadian. During this epoch of Earth, Mesopotamia was a beautiful, lush Arcadia with several cities providing the needs of the Anunnaki. Sippar was a spaceport. Nippur was a mission control center. Bad Tiberia was a metallurgical center, and Shur Pokak was a medical center. For approximately 200,000 years, Mesopotamia provided Enki and Enlil ample amounts of gold, as well as lush paradise in which to reside. Fruit trees of all kinds were brought to this Garden of Eden, or E.Din, as the Anunnaki called it. Around 250,000 BCE, the Anunnaki mining in Africa revolted. They were unhappy because it was terribly hot in the mines and they were becoming exhausted. So when Enki informed his brother of the incident, the workers took Enlil hostage. After some persuasion, their workers released Enlil. Both Enki and Enlil went before the Nibiruan Council, which came upon an agreement. There existed the possibility to kill two birds with one stone, as a worker class could be created to mine the gold, and they would also serve as land guardian vehicles for the Christos Syrians. Since Enki was the master geneticist, he and Ninhursag disappeared to the laboratory at Shurupak to perform the duty. The felines gave assistance to the Nibiruan Council in creating the workers, this satisfying the Council's agreement with the Galactic Federation and the Christos office of the planetary spiritual hierarchy. Reshandra, Anu's feline wife and mother of Ninhursag, came to Shurupak to oversee the assignment. She was the one who taught Enki and Ninhursag in the field of genetics. Being the descendants of Devon and the royal house of Evian, Anu and his family were karmically and genetically tied to Earth. The original humans of Tiamat were now evolving on a planet in the Pegasus star system, but with the creation of the primitive worker race, the Nibiruans were a parent race for life on Earth once again. Part of the Nibiruan Palladian divine plan was to complete polarity integration by mentoring and parenting this newly created race. And it is for spiritual reasons the occupants of Nibiru came to Earth, although this fact has been taken out of the historical records. To complete the job, Enki, Ninhursag, and Reshandra accelerated the DNA evolution of the workers, taking them from the stage of Homo erectus to Homo sapien. This gave the Earth Syrians time to relocate from the animal bodies they were occupying to the new human physical vehicles through incarnational cycles. This process took nearly 200,000 years to come to fruition. So, Zacharias Sitchin was correct, but not entirely. The Nibiruans garnered help from the Syrians in creating our race, that which we today call Homo sapiens sapien. After the DNA was transmuted, the halls of Amenti served as the fertilization ground. The halls of Amenti is a very ancient place, built over 6 million years ago. It is a dimensional warp in our space-time continuum resembling a womb. There is only one way to get in, and once you do it, it is like being in infinite space. In our creation, preparation was made on Sirius B. 16 males and 16 females comprised a marriage family and then traveled to Earth, going directly to the halls of Amenti, which was like a temple on the surface of the planet. The 32 members went into one of the chambers and merged their minds with a transdimensional flame. Their conception period here, transemination, was 2,000 years. So it stands that several advanced races joined in creating us from naturally evolving primates. DNA upgrading gave the primates more efficient reasoning abilities as well as the capacity to learn reading and writing. They still retained their telepathic abilities, although they did not acquire any new psychic ability. This was back when the glands associated with the sixth chakra in beings were fully activated. The pineal and pituitary glands of the primates were at full size and secreting pineoline and ambrita, respectively. These glands have atrophied over the years, so they no longer produce these chemicals, and that is why people on Earth have not been able to communicate telepathically for quite some time. These abilities, along with all psychic abilities, lay dormant in humans today, meaning they can be brought back through practice and the raising of vibrational frequencies. Although various psychic abilities were needed for spiritual growth, the physical vehicles given to the Earth Syrians were not too complex, due to the fact that those inhabiting animal bodies had regressed for millions of years. I mentioned before that the Niburians were tied genetically to the Earth. This is how it is so. When Enki and Ninhursag had gathered tissue and blood samples from the primates, they acquired eggs from the primate women and used sperm from some of the Anunnaki to fertilize those eggs, which were then embedded into the wombs of several female Anunnaki. 12 children were born with the abilities of the primates as well as the intellectual powers of a galactic human. In other words, the animal spirit had been replaced with a human spirit, although the soul still lacked. We, as physical incarnations on Earth, carry in ourselves some of the Niburian DNA. Since hybrids cannot procreate on their own, the Niburian scientists had to do it for them. But the Anunnaki women grew tired of being pregnant all the time. Enki and Ninhursag returned to the lab and gave the newly created race an upgrade, allowing them to reproduce on their own. This new race was referred to as Lulus, meaning primitive workers. It was now difficult for the Niburians to persuade the Earth Syrians to transfer into the new human bodies, since they were comfortable in the animal bodies only using animal instinct. The Lulus, containing only spirit, were like a smart pet. They communicated with the Earth Syrians in the animal bodies and cajoled them into accepting the new physical space suits. They catechized the Earth Syrians concerning the benefits of being in a human body. Unfortunately, at this time, some of the Anunnaki only saw the workers as free slave labor, and so mistreating them, Ninhursag was like a mother to the newly created race, and she appealed to Enlil, asking him to give the workers more rights. He accepted, and it was agreed upon to treat the Lulus more favorably. The epoch of 150,000 years BCE saw a new glacial period, forcing the Lulus and other civilizations on Earth, Andromedan, Pleiadian, Syrian, and others, to halt their spiritual evolution in order to focus on survival. This was one of the reasons it took so long to transfer the Earth Syrians to their new human bodies. The other being that it was easier all the time, or at the time, to be an animal than a human. There were many large animal groups that roamed in packs and hunted humans. When the Earth was reseeded after the destruction of Tiamat, a mutation in the plant life caused animals to grow very large. This resulted in the dinosaurs and other large creatures, creating a hazardous experience for the humans living on the planet. Many humans from the Lemurian colony retreated underground during this time to survive, and their descendants still occupy the inner Earth today. Starting in 100,000 BC, the climate warmed back up and there was a return to spiritual evolution. At this time, some of the Anunnaki were marrying the Lulus who had Earth Syrian souls. This is why it says in the Bible in Genesis that the gods came down from the heaven and married the daughters of men. The real translation should be, the Niburian and Syrian royal families came to Earth, created a hybrid race with primate DNA from Earth and human DNA from the genetic laboratory on Nibiru, and interbred with the new biological creation. Another ice age hit Earth around 75,000 BCE, and a spiritual evolution became stagnant once again. One group of beings, called by archaeologists today Cro-Magnon man, had achieved a greater degree of evolutionary progress and had survived during this time. So other tribes that died off began incarnating into this group. Around 50,000 BC, Ninhursag and Enki were given orders by the Christo-Syrians and the planetary spiritual hierarchy to upgrade the human bodies to the next level, giving them the opportunity for spiritual growth instead of physical and mental development. At this time, representatives from the civilizations of Yu, Rama, Lemuria, Egypt, and Maya were sent to Atlantis to ascertain a way of getting rid of the carnivorous large animals. This agreement, which saw the end of the animal threat, resonated in conjunction with Earth's divine plan. The remaining Earth Assyrians residing in animal bodies were also freed during this time. This was an important step, as the next stage of the spiritual evolution of humanity came with the introduction of the Christos seed. The Earth Assyrians now had roughly 52,000 years to evolve into land guardians capable of overseeing the planet. This period of time was divided into 10 5,200-year cycles, and during each cycle, the planetary spiritual hierarchy, the Christos Syrians, the Galactic Federation, the Syrian A Council, and the Nibiruan Council would meet to discuss the progress and necessary adjustments for the continued evolution of the Lulus. When the transfer of Earth's Syrian souls from animal bodies to human bodies was complete, the Christos upgrade was given to the Lulus by Amelius, the head of the etheric Syrian. In the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve is really the epilogue of Adapa and Lilith, the first two humans with the Christos upgrade. This was brought about by Ninhursag contributing an egg to be fertilized by Enki, which was then placed in Ninhursag's womb. Adapa was born, and it is he, Amelius, who is the integration point between the reptiles and humans. Adapa carried DNA that was reptilian and human, and it was the added feline and carrion DNA which gave the created race the gene of compassion. Adapa was cared for by Enki and Ninhursag, and later sperm was taken from him and fertilized by Ninhursag, creating Lilith. In real life, Eve was not born from her counterpart's rib like it says in the erroneous and fallacious biblical teaching. These new physical bodies, called Adams by Anu, were given to the red, yellow, and brown races, which were then placed in various locations on the planet as directed by the planetary spiritual hierarchy. Adapa and Lilith stayed in the Garden of Eden with Enki and Ninhursag, where they grew up together and eventually married in accordance with Pleiadian law. In the biblical Garden of Eden, the Lord can be replaced with Enlil, and the snake can be replaced with Enki. The tree of good and evil in the Bible relates to the school Enki formed to teach Adapa and Lilith ancient universal knowledge. It can be replaced with the Brotherhood of the Snake, the first mystery school of the Epoch. The fruit of the tree was symbolic of the wisdom taught to the Adapa line in the school. It states in Genesis that the Lord was mad at Adam and Eve for eating from the tree, but this is a lie. Enlil was angry with Enki for giving Adapa and Lilith too much knowledge when they lacked spiritual maturity, which is the literal version of events. Enlil feared the future generations would destroy themselves, thereby ruining the chance for polarity integration. It was Marduk who constructed the story about the serpent deceiving Eve, tricking her into eating the apple and sharing it with Adam. Marduk is behind many of the poisons instilled by modern religion, another one being the true nature of Jesus. Contemporary Christianity preaches that the only way to absolve sin is through Jesus, which is a total lie. There really is no sin. Sin is used by the churches as a scare tactic. The insertion of the snake deceiving Eve was Marduk's way of planting the seed that would eventually grow into a patriarchal society. Today, we are a patriarchal society in total, where a very few men make all the decisions and control all the money. The reinsertion of the divine feminine is necessary for polarity integration and planetary ascension. The Brotherhood of the Snake is the precursor to the mystery schools of the post-diluvian era and the Masonic Lodges. You will see very shortly how Freemasonry has taken over the world and suppressed the knowledge granted by the original mystery schools. It was Enki who formed the Brotherhood of the Snake to teach Adapa and his descendants spiritual wisdom, and it was Enlil who disapproved of this. In Enlil's mind, mankind must always stay spiritually one step ahead over technology. And he feared that Enki was giving Adapa and Lilith too much knowledge about sacred geometry and energy manipulation. Finally, after some quarreling, the Galactic Federation and spiritual hierarchy, including Enki and Enlil, agreed to move Adapa, Lilith, and their children outside of the Eden complex. This would ensure their race would have to fight for survival, slowing down technological advancement. The Brotherhood of the Snake continued, but it became corrupted. When power-hungry members took over control of the school, the priesthood officially began. This same priesthood has been corrupting Earth for thousands of years, the real history of the planet, and replacing it with organized religion. In 11,000 BC, Enlil turned out to be right. The Adapa race had degenerated to the point where it had to start over. It began in roughly 25,000 BC when Marduk and his reptilian allies arrogated Atlantis and began to harness powerful energy contained within the giant crystals. This technology was first used to power aircraft and underwater vehicles, but it served other purposes. Marduk, basically acting out the instincts of his predecessors, introduced advanced Nibiruan and reptilian technology to the Atlanteans, slowly earning their trust. Delegates from Lemuria traveled to Atlantis and attempted to warn the rulers about the dangers of trying to take over the world, but the Atlanteans in power did not heed the warning. There was great division stirring in Atlantis at the time, those who wanted to grow technologically and those who wanted to grow spiritually. Sound familiar? We are literally at that point today. Marduk felt that he should have the right to rule since he was the son of the snake princess and the grandson of the dragon queen. The giant Atlantean crystal was Marduk's hidden card. He used it to project a tractor beam onto one of Earth's comets, harnessing it and threatening the other civilizations on the planet with total destruction if they did not surrender. When Nibiru returned to Earth on its yearly course, it forced a discontinuity in the tractor beam, holding the comet in place, and the result was the sinking of the entire continent of Atlantis when the comet fell and struck it. This occurred in 21,000 BCE. The Great Deluge was also Marduk's doing. The band of moisture 3 miles around the Earth at the time was called the firmament. It was necessary to maintain the tropical environment by providing continual moisture and filtering the sun's rays. The firmament was held in place by crystal temples located underground. Marduk had his son Seth utilize a laser weapon in the Great Pyramid to launch an attack on the temples, which caused the collapse of the firmament, casting down a rainstorm lasting for over a month. This is the story of Noah's flood in the Bible. The Nibiruan Council, the planetary spiritual hierarchy, the Galactic Federation, and the felines came to an agreement not to alert the human population concerning the impending disaster, mainly because they underestimated Marduk and his reptilian collaborators. With Marduk wreaking havoc, they saw the destruction of mankind happening anyway. When the Nibiruans left Earth and watched the flood from their space station, they were unaware of the fact that Enki had warned Noah, his son, one of many children not mentioned, and told him to build a submarine in which he could safely transport him and his family. One of the Anunnaki was sent to help build and pilot the underwater craft. It wasn't a boat. Anu and the council was doleful when they saw 400,000 years of work destroyed, but ultimately grateful for what Enki did. It made it much easier to begin repopulation again. After the deluge, Enki and Enlil brought everything necessary to farm and practice husbandry to Noah and his family. Mount Ararat was indeed the place Noah's submarine landed when the flood was over and the waters receded. He began farming on the slopes as Ninurta and Nanar dammed the surrounded land as Enki had taught them. It wasn't until 10,500 BC that mankind had proliferated once again in Mesopotamia and in other areas. The modern-day Jerusalem was known as Mount Moriah in the days the Anunnaki walked the earth. This was where the spaceport was built anew. Eridu, Nippur, Shuruppak, and the other cities were also rebuilt. The Great Pyramids remained intact, but had to be dug out from many feet of sand and dirt. In 9000 BC, Osiris and Seth, descendants of Enki, were now ruling Egypt. You will recognize Osiris, of course, as one of the main Egyptian gods. Nanur and Ninurta, descendants of Enlil, facilitated the ruling of Earth since Marduk was no longer trusted. Adad, Enlil's other son, went to South America to set up gold mining operations there. It was during this period that many of the younger generations of Nibiruans started to fight for power. The ancient Greek stories about the battles between the Titans and Olympians relate directly to this time when Ninurta, Nanar, Utu, Adad, Inanna, Seth, Osiris, Marduk, and other young descendants of Anu saw themselves as worthy rulers. A new conflict was soon to emerge that began the Pyramid Wars. Seth and Osiris both wanted to rule Egypt. So Seth slew his brother. Horus, Osiris' son, pledged to avenge his father's death by instigating the first pyramid war. It is important to insert here that the Great Pyramids back then were space facilities, among other things, such as initiation chambers and technology vats. The Second Pyramid War started 300 years after the first one. On this occurrence, the descendants of Enlil battling the descendants of Enki. It ended on direct intervention from Ninhursag, who took control of the Great Pyramids and emptied them of their advanced equipment. Thoth, one of Enki's later born sons, was given rulership over Egypt in 8,600 BC from 8,500 BC until 3,500 BC. There was peace and harmony on earth. Egypt was an interesting place. It became the home of not only the Thoth Brotherhood, a group of immortal beings headed by Thoth, Thoth's son, but also many Atlantean survivors. With their memory erased by the pole shift, the Atlanteans reverted back to barbarism and had to wait a long time before they could even begin to evolve again. It was the Thoth Brotherhood who established the Egyptian civilization and not the Sumerians like Sitchin says. This brotherhood of ascended masters waited until the time was right and then sent members from their group dressed like Egyptians to reseed the knowledge of Atlantis. They aided in their stair-step evolution of the Egyptians because they knew how civilization can grow or diminish overnight. Both the Egyptian and Sumerian civilizations seem to have not only risen but also fallen overnight, and the explanation for this lies in the precession of the equinoxes. As the Earth moves away from the center of the galaxy, humanity falls asleep, and as the Earth moves closer to the plane of the galaxy, to the photon band, humanity wakes up and becomes more conscious. After the last pole shift, the Earth was at the point in its precession where planetary consciousness fell asleep, and thus each time new information was given, the people almost immediately began to lose it until about 500 BC, when the Egyptian civilization was almost totally gone. Towards the end of their culture, the Egyptians were losing the knowledge about the one spirit and began to worship many gods. One can only conjecture that the Anunnaki were some of these gods. The ascended masters decided to intervene once more, and so sent a Christ consciousness being to be incarnated into a body in order to capture that notion and place it back into the Akashic record. This being was the person we now know as Akhenaten, who was a soul from Sirius. Akhenaten disrupted all the religions, told everyone that priests were unnecessary and that God was in each person. He gave initiates a 12-year advanced training and produced nearly 300 Christ consciousness beings. In 1350 BC, these beings joined with the Thoth Brotherhood and lived in the underground city beneath the Great Pyramid. Later, they migrated to Masada, Israel, where they became known as the Essene Brotherhood, the group that Jesus joined. Mary, Jesus' mother, was one of these immortal beings. Although Akhenaten was disposed of after a 17-year reign, everything in Egypt reverted back to old ways. But it didn't matter because the leader did his job. He placed the foreign information back into the Akashic records and established the Essene Brotherhood, which accepted Christ and prepared the planet for the age of Aquarius, the age of Christ consciousness, the age of Pisces acting as the period of incubation. In 3700 BC, kingship was officially lowered from Nibiru to Earth. The Nibiruans, seeing that mankind had proved itself worthy of ruling itself, and the new priest-king line was, as it was, consisted of half Nibiruan Palladian DNA and half Earth human DNA. In Nippur, Enlil gave the humans the calendar, this corresponding to the period when time began to be documented on Earth. Alulim was the first demigod of the Neolithic period. He was the first half Nibiruan, half Earth human ruler of Earth, his predecessors all being extraterrestrial. Marduk was banned from many places, but he was still ruler of Babylon. He convinced the Babylonians to create their own spaceship and launching pad, later to be known as the Tower of Babel. As the planetary spiritual hierarchy and galactic federation saw that Marduk used humans as pawns for his plans, they made a decision to confound the languages of mankind, thereby slowing them down and preventing Marduk from amassing an army. In order that humans could communicate with each other once again, Marduk had to spend much time teaching them all the languages. But the planetary spiritual hierarchy had further plans to thwart Marduk's designs for world and galactic domination. They decided to alter the humans' DNA structure and suppress their psychic and telepathic abilities. Enki and Ninhursag retreated to the laboratory, and Shorupak once more and unraveled the humans' 12 DNA strands. They then disconnected 10 strands from the endocrine system in the physical body, and what this did was halt the production of the chemicals that activate the pineal, pituitary, and hypothalamus glands. Only a few humans retained this connection, and they served as a communications link between the Nibiruans and Earth humans for future generations. These humans were to become prophets, mystics, and shamans. Today they are known as psychics, although everyone possesses this latent ability. After this act of protection, Marduk was enraged. He returned to Egypt and replaced Thoth as ruler, who in turn traveled to South America and started the civilizations that today compose the whole continent. Thoth was known to the ancient peoples there as Quetzalcoatl, the white-plumed serpent. In 3113 BC, the serpent, taking on the representation of the descendants of Enki, was carried around by Quetzalcoatl as a talisman. Conversely, the symbol carried by Enlil and his descendants was the cross, the emblem of Nibiru and the house of Anu. In his fight for command over Egypt, Marduk indiscriminately caused the death of Dumuzi, the husband of Inanna, throwing the widow into inflammation. She demanded justice, and Marduk was almost killed. However, intervention from Ninhursag constituted Marduk to be a prisoner in the Great Pyramid of Giza instead. After he was released, he went into exile. In 2900 BC, Inanna was granted rulership in the Indus Valley, in what is now modern-day India. She was also granted the historical records concerning the Nibiruans' relationship with Earth, which she later wrote down. In 2300 BC, Inanna fell in love with Sargon, and they formed a new empire called the Akkadian Empire. She and Marduk continued their altercation. They fought acrimoniously back and forth, and these battles were recorded in the ancient records of India and Mesopotamia. In 2200 BC, Marduk finally succeeded in controlling all the knowledge-encoded crystals scattered throughout the earth. The possessor of the crystals gave him her power over whatever the crystals controlled. So one crystal might have controlled the weather, another might have controlled the electromagnetic variations of the planet, and so on. With these in his grasp, Marduk assembled an army on Mars, which was deserted at the time. With things finally going his way, Marduk dethroned Anu from command of Nibiru and Earth. In 2024 BCE, the Nibirian Council made a decision to bomb the space facilities on Earth, lest Marduk were to gain control of these facilities and attempt to take over the Pleiades star system. If Marduk ever succeeded at this, he would be only one step away from taking over the galaxy. The council chose Abraham, born from a royal Nibirian family, to carry a plutonium bomb from Sumer to the spaceport in southern Mesopotamia. From there, Uta, a son of Enlil, detonated the bomb, evoking the destruction of all the space facilities in the area, along with Sodom and Gomorrah. The city was left at the bottom of the Dead Sea, and the surrounding area was turned into a desert. The populations in the cities of Sumer were also wiped out due to the radiation from the bomb. It was this area that was given to Abraham as his heritage and labeled the land of Canaan. Another part of Abraham's mission was to deposit uranium into Anunnaki temples bordering Sumer so as to control the emotional bodies of future progeny. There is a symbiotic relationship between the breakdowns of the emotional body through karma and the breakdown of radioactive elements via transmutation. So you can see how radioactive materials have been powerful devices on Earth. Just ask the physicists who exploded the hydrogen atom. After 5,000 years, uranium is thoroughly polluted with emotional body detritus, human karma. In later years, more uranium was placed underground so Anu could monitor Earth when he left via the radiation. Naturally, Abraham became a patriarch of the Old Testament because the Canaan religions were set up by the Anunnaki. Eventually, Abraham's descendants reclaimed the land of Canaan from scattered tribes with the help of Tuthmosis, Moses, another descendant of priestly royal Nibirian family. In 1500 BCE, Marduk is now fully in control. To secure his position, he had to go about changing many things, which he did. He worked to demote women to a lower social status. He began the churches, and he proclaimed himself to be God. In the Enuma Elish, the Sumerian epic of creation, Marduk is the god who defeats the goddess Tiamat and claims the throne of the heavens, having set before him 50 epithets by which he would be known. The religions that were set up discontinued goddess worship and Pleiadian communal life. Women who were leaders were branded as witches and burned at the stake. Fear became the ultimate control factor and continues to be so even today. The global elite and popular icons today who masquerade around on television and in expensive cars worship Marduk and Lucifer, although many of them do not even know it. The lizards who evolved naturally on Earth were worshipped as gods by the Anunnaki because of their advanced technology and the Kundalini energy surging in their spines. The Anunnaki are a metallic biology, so to us they would look like robot lizards. The metallic electromagnetic force in their bodies resonated with the sacred fire of the earth lizards, and as such they received electromagnetic Kundalini energy from these earth reptilians. In this way, they were able to monitor all devices based on electromagnetism, but were unable to monitor silica-based technologies. That is why they are trying to stop the transmutation of our cells from carbon to silica-based, because they would no longer be able to control us. When the Anunnaki came to Earth, they donned various biological costumes, and that is why they were depicted as great beings with cat, lion, and bird heads. The system of control set up on Earth has utilized metallic forms of communication. The intelligence agencies of current use this type of communication, but it is unbeknownst to the general population that this current of information can be tapped into at any time. So just as the CIA can monitor everything you are doing, so too can you monitor everything the CIA does. It all has to do with holograms. A hologram is produced when a laser beam is split into two beams. The first beam is bounced off an image to be photographed, while the second beam is mirrored back, so it will collide with the reflected light of the image. This creates an interference pattern, which is encoded on film. And if you shine another light into it, the image that was photographed can be projected onto any space. The space we currently live in is filled with waves from numerous sources forming an interference patterns, and images can be created out of them. The media has specific surface three-dimensional sounds and images that we can all hear and see, but there are also mass sounds and images. These subliminal communications are used to encode us with negative thought forms. Any one of us is capable of picking up these metallic vibrational communications because our own life forces generate electromagnetic fields. However, unless your vibration is raised beyond the access of the world management team, the Anunnaki-imposed Earth management team, your electromagnetic fields can be penetrated and are monitored. According to researcher David Icke, a race of Nordic humans lived primarily in Atlantis before the firmament collapsed, the deluge, and a reptilian race lived primarily in Lemuria, Mu. After the Great Flood, peoples who survived in the highest elevations returned to the lowlands. Survivors from Atlantis, mainly Nordic and Aryan bloodlines, and Lemuria, Mu, reptilian bloodlines, trekked to other lands and utilized advanced knowledge to found other cultures. Fernando Montesinos, an early Spanish chronicler, asserted that there were two distinct Inca empires, one before the deluge and one after. Survivors who had found shelter in the mountains, possibly Machu Picchu, returned to Cusco and the Andes to start their civilization over again. The most notable of these start-again civilizations was Sumer in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Conventional historians and anthropologists maintain that other independent civilizations of great advancement also appeared suddenly in Egypt and the Indus Valley. The Golden Age is typically referred as the time period circa 50,000 BC and before, when the Lulus and other primitive hominids lived among the alien gods. Many extraterrestrial races were visiting Earth at this time, as the climate was much warmer and more tropical, hence a paradise-like vision conjured by the Bible. After the deluge, the gods returned to humans and bestowed upon them advanced knowledge that was passed on through initiation in the mystery schools. the forebears of modern secret societies. Dr. Arthur David Horn, former professor of biological anthropology at Colorado State University, corroborates this information in his book, Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins. Today's ruling families employ reptilian symbolism on a regular basis because their gods are literally reptiles who came from space. The caduceus double snake image is the logos for today's medical profession, and it represents two snakes forming DNA double helix. The wings at the top represent what happens when the Kundalini energy shoots up the spine and out through the crown chakra. Kundalini is a Sanskrit word meaning coiled up, like a snake. In people who are spiritually asleep, the Kundalini stays in the root chakra. But once the mind opens, the Kundalini uncoils and one can fly, psychically and spiritually, that is. In Egypt, the Brotherhood of the Snake was known as the Royal Court of the Dragon, and it was erected to infiltrate the royal and religious centers of power, especially the mystery schools. Historian and 33rd degree Mason Manly P. Hall recounts how the black magicians of Atlantis were reptilian arch-sorcerers from Lemuria who attempted to hijack the magical power of Atlantis from the Nordics using crystal energy and black magic. Hall writes, while the elaborate ceremonial magic of antiquity was not necessarily evil, there arose from its perversion several false schools of sorcery or black magic in Egypt. The black magicians of Atlantis continued to exercise their superhuman powers until they had completely undermined and corrupted the morals of the primitive mysteries. They usurped the position formerly occupied by the initiates and seized the reins of spiritual government. Thus, black magic dictated the state religion and paralyzed the intellectual and spiritual activities of the individual by demanding his complete and unhesitating acquiescence in the dogma formulated by the priestcraft. The pharaoh became a puppet in the hands of the Scarlet Council, a committee of arch-sorcerers elevated to power by the priesthood. The priesthood was the most powerful ruling class, and it consisted of reptilian hybrids. Today it is the Druidic Council headed by Baron Guy de Rothschild. There were numerous types of reptilian human hybrids and the etheric reptilians running amok on the earth at this time. So it is wise to not compartmentalize who is who. A myriad of ancient tablets describe many types of gods and or advanced beings. In northern India lays a secret vault housing ancient tablets. These tablets tell the story of how the Nagas, or the Nakals, the reptilians from Lemuria, had traveled to India via Burma to establish a colony there. The Vedas detail that the earliest royal bloodlines of India, the priest kings, arrived from a place across the sea, Lemuria. These bloodlines were descended from the Brigus, an order of adepts initiated into the ancient knowledge. In his book, Gods, Sages, and Kings, Vedic Secrets of Ancient Civilization, David Frawley relates that the monarchs of these bloodlines included the serpent king Nahusha, and they were expanded into the 5 tribes which populated a large part of the Indian subcontinent. The Nagas also populated China, Tibet, and other parts of Asia. The Mahayupati, an ancient Indian Buddhist text, lists 80 kings who descended from the Nagas. Hindu legend claims the Nagas can shift between human and reptilian form at will. This is what is called shape-shifting today, and there are signs of it in positions of power. Whomsoever has the proper DNA can focus his or her attention on specific genes and shapeshift via unlocking vibrational codes in the cellular structure. The serpent fish gods of Babylon and Sumer were also said to have this ability. Michael Mott, an ardent researcher into this topic, proclaims in his book, Caverns, Cauldrons, and Concealed Creatures, the Nagas are described as a very advanced race or species with a highly developed technology. They also harbor a disdain for human beings whom they are said to abduct, torture, interbreed with, and even eat. The interbreeding has supposedly led to a wide variety of forms, ranging from completely reptilian to nearly human in appearance. Among their many devices are death rays and vimanana, or flying disc-shaped aerial craft. These craft are described at length in many ancient Vedic texts, including the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. The Naga race is related to another underworld race, the Hindu demons, or the Rakshasas. They also possess as individuals magical stones or a third eye in the middle of their brows, known to many students of Eastern mysticism today as the focal point for one of the higher chakras or energy channel points of the humanoid nervous system. The chakra associated with inner visions, intuition, and other esoteric concepts. Even the Chinese emperors claimed descent from serpent gods. They were known as the Lung, and the earliest emperors were depicted with reptilian features. The priest kings of the Peruvian Incas wore bracelets and anklets in the image of a snake, as the great kings during the Mycenaean age were regarded as being snake-like. In fact, serpent symbolism abounds in almost every ancient culture. Stuart Schwerdlow is an American author who speaks out against the takeover of the planet by reptilian entities who operate in between dimensions and from the lower astral realm. Stuart was kidnapped as a child at night with his mother's full knowledge and taken to Montauk, where he endured a mind control program. Under government military control, Stuart learned about the agenda for global domination and the transdimensional reptilians behind it all. He relates how he saw reptilian entities at Montauk who appeared to pop in and out of this dimensional frequency at will. Even Preston Nichols, an engineer who worked at Montauk, describes these reptilian entities who worked alongside human scientists and also gray aliens in his book, Blue Blood, True Blood. Schwerdlow announces how the reptilians who entered into this dimension long ago were borderline physical, that is to say, they did not have a concrete physical form like we know our bodies to be. In order to satisfy this dilemma, the reptilians mixed their DNA with the Nordics from Atlantis so that they could operate in this dimension. That is why they are so obsessed with blonde-haired, blue-eyed people. They need their genetics to play in this dimensional reality. Schwerdlow also states that the reptilians are from numerous star systems, including Alpha Draconis, Orion, and Sirius. This could be why the picture below depicts how the Great Pyramid of Giza lined up with the star system of Alpha Draconis, Sirius, Orion, Ursa Minor, and Ursa Major. The British and Roman empires were the work of these reptilian bloodlines. Royal and aristocratic families have long been called blue bloods because their increased reptilian DNA means their blood contains more copper. This copper-based blood turns blue-green when oxidizing, hence the blue blood color. When Lemuria was destroyed, the survivors relocated to northern India and built a massive underground civilization, all the while relaunching their genetic takeover of the world. Sumer was just one of the places selected to continue this procedure. The Sumerians were known as the Sumerians, and they expanded into northern Africa, Central Asia, northern India, and the steppes of Russia. According to Schwerdlow, the Aryan leaders, all blue bloods, became the sultans and rajas of legend, and the Sumerians infiltrated Egyptian society and implanted their reptilian bloodline into the royal families of the pharaohs, especially the Hyksos kings. The Egyptians were also known as the Phoenicians and were descendants of Atlantis. In Africa, the Sumerians created a royal bloodline of Black African kings and queens. The bloodline computer network was just getting started. When Atlantis and Lemuria were destroyed, Earth was thrown into a dark age where humans lost a lot of the secret knowledge gained in the epochs before the flood and the technology struggles which destroyed most of the planet. Earth fell from the fourth and fifth dimensions into the third dimension, and many survivors of this shift fled underground to live in the great caverns and cities erected there many thousands of years ago. There are still people today who accidentally stumble across secret passageways which lead them underground and into mystical cities and caves. Throughout recent history, we can look back at different personas and see the perpetuation of the work of the Atlantean and Lemurian arch sorcerers. Francis Bacon was one of the occultists who ordered to work on the grand plan of the Atlantean necromancers during his stay in the Renaissance. Even Shakespeare was aware of the plan of the Black nobility, the European patriarchs and matriarchs of the interbreeding reptilian Aryan bloodline clans. He inserted alchemical antidotes in his plays and died on a very symbolic date. Agartha and the Hollow Earth. To most people's bewilderment, there is an extensive network of underground tunnels and cities right underneath our feet. It is home of the reptiles, which control the planet, and many other extraterrestrial civilizations that have been living on the planet for thousands of years. Some civilizations are the ancestors of Lemuria, Atlantis, and the Mayan civilizations, and others. Many extraterrestrials who come to Earth build bases underground and conduct biological and scientific operations there. There is one major underground civilization known as Agartha, and many of its inhabitants are giants. They have much more advanced technology and agricultural methods than which is presented to the general population living above ground. Many of the underground cities share a common capital, that being Shambhala. Most of it resides on fifth density, and souls can travel there during the dream state or during meditation. There is a tunnel which connects Agartha to the Great Pyramid of Giza, and there are also holes at both the poles which lead to it. These holes are wide enough that ships and planes can fly into them, but there is an energy field that camouflages the entrance. If one were to look hard enough, one would find them. Many explorers and pilots have accidentally entered the inner Earth in past history. The structure of the planet is deceiving because the very top and bottom of the Earth are actually concave. Most people think they are convex. That is why explorers unknowingly enter the inner Earth on their expeditions. They think they are traveling parallel to the surface of Earth when they really are traveling perpendicular. There are also entrances to the inner Earth in Africa, the Yucatan Peninsula, Tibet, and Russia. There is a dimensional portal in the Bermuda Triangle that takes one to inner Earth and has been the source for numerous disappearances in the area over the last 200 years. There is also a sun in the inner Earth, but it is not like the sun in the center of the solar system. It is very small and utilizes technology to produce light. One case of a certain Admiral Richard Byrd recounts the story of how in 1947, a man, Byrd, and his crew accidentally flew into the inner Earth when they thought they were flying over the North Pole. When they were flying underground, they saw mountains, lakes, exotic vegetation, and a diverse animal life. Animals with mammoth-sized grazed in fields and roamed areas that were like major parks. Byrd's plane was finally greeted by flying saucers of an unusual type, who directed him to a safe landing area where he met the Queen and King of Agartha. They told Byrd they allowed him to enter because they gauged him to be of high moral standard. They expressed their concern for the above-ground civilizations, especially after the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were worried that the humans living above ground would destroy the planet and ultimately Agartha as well without even knowing it. The Agarthians taught Admiral Byrd and his crew many things, and after a while led them back to their plane to be escorted back out. At the end, expressing a great interest in Byrd to inform the rest of the Earth population about his discovery. In 1956, Byrd led another expedition to the South Pole, penetrating well over 2,000 miles to the center of Earth. The American press released Byrd's discovery, but lo and behold, the secret government covered the story right up. Ray Palmer, the editor of the magazine Flying Saucer, published a detailed story about Admiral Byrd's journey into the inner Earth. The secret government destroyed nearly every copy and even the plates at the printing press. This happened once more when National Geographic published a similar article. Underground bases and cities have been erected all over the planet. Vedic lore tells us the Nagas dwelled in the two main underground cities of Patala and Bogavati. It was there they battled with the Nordics living in underground kingdoms. This same type of struggle can be seen today when the Western powers of Atlantis, United States, Great Britain, and South America, working against the Eastern powers of Lemuria, China, Japan, and Russia. They work together to enslave the population, but at the top they struggle amongst themselves for ultimate control. Similar stories of underground cities and tunnels can be found in Tibet and China, and even in the Gilgamesh stories. In caverns, cauldrons, and concealed creatures, Mott writes that in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, there are many traditions of underground cultures. Researcher Alan Walton has also written extensively concerning these underground fiefdoms. He writes, underneath most major cities, especially in the USA, in fact, there exist subterranean counterpart cities controlled by the Masonic hybrid alien elite. Often surface-subsurface terminals exist beneath Masonic lodges, police stations, airports, and federal buildings of major cities, and even not so major cities. The population ratio is probably close to 10% of the population. The hybrid military-industrial fraternity elite living below ground as opposed to the 90% living above. This does not include the full-blood reptilian species who live in even deeper recesses of the earth. Some of the major population centers were deliberately established by the Masonic hybrid elite of the old and new worlds to afford easy access to already existing underground levels, some of which are thousands of years old. Considering that the Los Alamos labs had a working prototype nuclear-powered thermo bull, drill that could literally melt tunnels through the earth at a rate of 8 miles per hour 40 years ago, you can imagine how extensive these underground systems have become. These subcities also offer close access to organized criminal syndicates which operate on the surface. They have developed the whole science of Borgonomics, through which they literally nickel and dime us into slavery via multi-level taxation, inflation, sublimation, manipulation, regulation, fines, fees, licenses, and the entire debt credit scam, which is run by the Federal Reserve and Wall Street. New York City, I can confirm, is one of the largest draconian nests in the world, or rather the ancient underground Atlantean systems that network beneath that area. They literally control the entire Wall Street pyramid from below, with more than a little help from reptilian bloodlines like the Rockefellers, etc. In fact, these reptilian genetic lines operate in a parasitic manner, the underground society acting as the parasite society and the surface society operating as the host society. We must rid ourselves of these parasites. The emerald tablets, which were discovered beneath the Mayan temple in Mexico, were supposedly written by Thoth, and they relate the reptilians and their ability to shapeshift and possess people. Maurice Doreal discovered the tablets and completed the translation in 1925, but it was much later when he was given permission to publish part of the translations. Here is an excerpt that you can understand why they have been suppressed from the mainstream. Speak I of ancient Atlantis, speak of the days of the kingdom of shadows, speak of the coming of the children of shadows. Out of the great deep were they called by the wisdom of the earth. Man called for the purposes of gaining great power. Far in the past, before Atlantis existed, men there were who delved into darkness, using dark magic, calling up beings from the great deep below us. Forth came they into this cycle, formless were they, of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earthmen. Only through blood could they form being, only through man could they live in the world. In ages past were they conquered by the masters, driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained hidden in spaces and planes unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. Aye, when the blood was offered, forth came they to dwell among men. In the form of men moved they amongst us, but only to sight. Were they as our men, serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, taking form and ruling over the man. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. But know ye, the masters were mighty in magic, able to lift the veil from the face of the serpent, able to send him back to his place. Came they to man and taught him the secret, the word that only a man can pronounce. Swift they lifted the veil from the serpent and cast him forth from place among men. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth in a place that is open at times to the world. Unseen they walk among thee in places where the rites have been said. Again, as time passes onward, shall they take the semblance of men. Called may they be by the master who knows the white and the black, but only the white master may control and bind them while in the flesh. Seek not the kingdom of shadows, for evil will surely appear, for only the master of brightness shall conquer the shadow of fear. Thoth speaks of the transdimensional reptilian entities and how they appear in this dimension etheric at first, but then taking on a physical characteristic. They come from the kingdom of shadows, the space in between dimensions, and they rule over society via secret society. Crept they into the councils, taking form and ruling over man. Their bloodlines practice black magic and can shapeshift between human and reptilian forms. In the form of man moved they amongst us, but only to sight where they are as men. The ancient mystery schools and initiation. The ancient mystery schools are teachings that were descended from the Brotherhood of the Snake. There are many derivatives of this ancient teachings that exist in other cultures, but for now I'll focus on Egypt. After Atlantis was destroyed, many of its inhabitants traveled to Egypt, one of them being Thoth Hermes. Thoth was an incarnation of the Buddha and closely connected to the Great White Brotherhood. He taught the Egyptians many things about spirituality and soul evolution. These concepts originally being propagated by the Brotherhood of the Snake. He also aided in the construction of the pyramids and temples. In the movies Raiders of the Lost Ark, there was a device called the Ark of the Covenant. The Nazis had stolen it and were attempting to harness its power. Although the audience was unaware of the specifics of the technology, you will see later on how Hollywood uses subliminal messages in movies to hint at certain factual events. The Ark of the Covenant in ancient Egypt was a device that transmitted high-frequency energy beams. In effect, this device could nullify gravity. When this beam was shot at 10-ton rocks, they floated in the air like pebbles. It is interesting that many scholars believe the Great Pyramids were built with ropes and underfed slaves. I wonder if the history books left out the fact that those slaves were actually giants on steroids. If they were, I would consider for a moment believing mainstream archaeology. Among the endless amount of suppressed history, there is much misconception regarding what the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually meant for. Again, mainstream archaeology incessantly tries to fool us. We are told it was a burial chamber for the 4th dynasty pharaoh Khufu. Really? It's just a tomb for one man? Allow me to clarify. The Great Pyramid was in reality a large antenna that pulled in cosmic energies as it was aligned perfectly with the cosmic current of this solar system and the central sun of the galaxy. When it was first built, it was encased in white limestone, which caused it to shine, and floating above the top in suspension was a large and powerful crystal sheath in pure gold. Microwave generators were stationed in the shaft in the center of the pyramid, traveling straight into the ground, and they were used to anchor the high-frequency cosmic energies into the earth. An Ark of the Covenant, there was more than one, was placed in the center of the capstone, and once charged by the strong mental powers of a spiritual master, the covenant could function on its own and distribute light energy throughout Egypt. The Great Pyramid also acted as a transmitting device for the Earth's Kundalini. The golden crystal capstone represented the third eye of the planet and acted as a communications device, making it easier for the planetary spiritual hierarchy to communicate with inhabitants on Earth. Later in his dissertation, it will become clear to you how the symbol of the pyramid and all-seeing eye on the back of the $1 bill relates to this concept, and how the global elite use this image to control mainstream society. In and of itself, the Great Pyramid represents the spiritualization of matter, as all physical matter you see around you is the condensed form of spiritual energy. The Great Pyramid was also an observatory used for charting the heavens. As the capstone represented the third eye chakra, the other parts of the pyramid represented other chakras. The king's chamber symbolized the heart chakra, the chamber of rebirth, and the well of life symbolized other chakras. Above the aforementioned roles, the Great Pyramid was used as a place of initiation for the Great White Brotherhood. The very essence of initiation works to unite the conscious and subconscious minds with the superconscious mind, the soul. Initiates were taken into the Great Pyramid, where they were put through a series of tests, in all there being 7 stages of initiation. Each subsequent or higher stage drew the initiate closer and closer to self-realization. The early stages dealt with the development of psychic abilities such as channeling, telepathy, telekinesis, and communication with the nature spirits. During the early phases of initiation, an initiate developed proficient clairvoyant, clairsentient, and clairaudient abilities and was severely tested in the release of negative emotions and tendencies. For example, many initiates were taught to balance the 12 sets of opposite characteristics. These opposing forces appear below: keeping silent versus talking, receptivity versus resistance to influence, obeying versus ruling, humility versus self-confidence, lightning, speed versus circumspection, accepting everything versus being able to differentiate, fighting versus peace, caution versus courage, possessing nothing versus controlling everything, having no ties versus being loyal, contempt for death versus regard for life, indifference versus love. Initiates were also often taught the 7 octaves of vibration, which are physical, mineral and plant, emotion, animal, mental, average person, intuitive, genius, atomic, prophet, monadic, divine wisdom and universal love, logoic, God being. These 7 octaves also relate to the 7 primary rays emanating from the source. Among many other things, initiates were educated about universal history and the importance of raising one's personal vibrational frequency. The process of initiation can be likened to lucid dreaming. In the higher levels of initiation, an initiate is put into a trance, at which point he or she is traveling in his or her astral body. Spirit guides acted out scenes that the person experiencing astral body consciousness would react to. Often in one of these scenes, an initiate will enter a room where many people are having sexual intercourse. That person would then be approached by an attractive member of the opposite sex and would have to refuse their advances. In another scene, an initiate would then be surrounded by men with daggers who would then threaten him, her. A priest would come to the initiate's aid and offer to sacrifice himself so the initiate could escape. To pass the test, the initiate would have to refuse and offer to stand by the priest and fight the invaders to the death. There were many other tests. Many historical personages like Jesus, Erlane, Cheney, Elizabeth Harrach, and others have gone through initiations in the Great Pyramid. History rewritten. In the 1990s, researcher David Icke traveled to Africa to corroborate the information I presented thus far concerning the reptilian extraterrestrial takeover of the post-diluvian Earth. In Africa, Icke met with a man named Cradle Mutua, one of the last two remaining Sansusis, shamans of the South African Zulu nation. He is an official keeper of ancient knowledge concerning the birth of our civilization and the reptilian gods, which came down from the sky and interbred with human females. These crossbreed bloodlines, called the Nephilim, have ruled for ages by maintaining positions of power all over the world. David Icke himself has uncovered an immense collection of knowledge and data from his worldly travels, revealing this exact same story. He has interviewed an extensive network of mind-controlled slaves, Illuminati, and Freemason whistleblowers, and also those who have seen people in positions of power shapeshift into reptilian entities and then back again. David Icke has deduced that these people are members of the bloodline families stemming from the original Nephilim. In 1999, he released a video called The Reptilian Agenda, an interview with Cradle Mutua in a small village just outside of Johannesburg. In this consultation, much information was revealed which will now be disseminated. Cradle refers to the reptilian extraterrestrials as the Chitari, also known as the children of the serpent. They came down in large golden bowl-like craft one day in ancient Africa, thousands of years ago, and appeared to the native tribe of Black people. At that time, the people did not speak because they communicated telepathically. Their minds were so powerful that a hunter could crouch in a bush and mentally call for an animal to kneel before the hunter to be slain. Animals and humans respected each other and communicated with each other. The particular tribe in Africa in which Cradle is speaking of was also androgynous, meaning both male and female qualities were intact in one body. The reptilian extraterrestrials told the people they were gods and therefore should be worshipped as such. They stated they had evolved on the earth long ago and had come back to make the people of Africa gods. First, they divided the Africans into male and female and taught them how to speak. After this was done, the Africans realized they had been hoodwinked. They had lost their mental powers and now were divided sexually. When the males and females had relationships together, there arose the problem of those who slept around, causing the disharmonious relationships between members of the tribe. The Africans were also forced to mine metals. The chief of the Chitari was named Humbaba, and it is interesting to note that in the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, the king of the ancient city of Uruk, along with his friend Enkidu, slay a monstrous beast named Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest. The Humbaba Cradle speaks of could most likely be the same entity. Cradle also tells of how the Chitari fought the real God, prime creator, in a war in the higher dimensions. They tried to usurp the throne of heaven and were banished to the lower frequencies, fourth density and below. This is the fall of Lucifer in Christian myth. God sewed their mouths shut so they could not eat, and that is why they must feed off intense human emotion. Humans supply the needed energy for the Chitari, most of them living underground. That is why they cause wars, famines, and epidemics. They feed off the negative human emotions emitted from these periods of time. The Greys, who are the genetic offspring of these reptilian entities, work for them, controlling the human populations of Earth. There is also a group known as the Beasts of the Blanket. They are involved in the selection of various African kings and also reconnaissance missions where they collect crashed UFO discs and other technology. Credo also notes that when the Chitari get sick, they rub gold dust on themselves, which harmonize their energetic bodies. One fascinating story Credo recounts tells of how once a few friends ate the skin of what they called a puana, or a gray alien. When they did this, they became very ill, breaking out an intense rash and swelling. After a week, they all healed up and experienced a dramatic increase in their perception of reality. Their sense of smell, taste, and sight became radically sensitized. When Credo looked at a tree, he saw colors beyond colors and felt that he was one with the whole universe. It is commonly believed that these heightened senses have been bred out of us, which is partially correct. It happened when our DNA was reduced from 12 to 2 strands. Credo also noted that the richer people in this world become the more they act like the Chitari, and I agree. People in positions of power who are rich and well-connected are generally greedy and arrogant. They always want more control, more money, more power. They're also privy to a certain knowledge which Credo says is incredibly more ancient than Einstein or any other famous mathematician or physician. The ancient Africans themselves were aware that space and time are really one and the same, and that it is possible to travel backward and forward in time. In the possession of Credo is an ancient necklace he calls the Necklace of the Mysteries, with carvings and depictions of the reptilian gods and various relatable symbols imbued onto its surface. Credo says it was forbidden to depict Credo says it was forbidden to depict the reptilians as they really were. And that is why ancient drawings in caves and on stone tablets reveal human-looking gods who are taller than everyone else. The size difference was the ancients' way of relating the difference of the gods when their real appearance could not be depicted. One of the symbols on the belt was the constellation of Orion, a place Credo concludes the Chitauri came from originally. The Chitauri themselves believe that women are lower than males, and that is why our society is based on a patriarchal nature. The symbol of the phallus is seen over and over again in ancient structures and monuments, and even today in popular culture. The cover of the Little Mermaid DVD shows a hidden phallus posing as one of the pillars to the castles in the background. Phallic symbolism is literally everywhere in our present and past culture. Popular depictions of the devil also bear striking similarities to what the Chitauri were said to look like. In the movie Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the protagonist is named Darth Maul. His face is almost an exact representation of that of a Chitauri. Some Chitauri, according to Credo, had a third eye in the lower middle portion of their foreheads. This eye was psychic. It could penetrate into anyone's mind and was deemed the all-seeing eye. Later, this became the Eye of Horus. There is another interesting story related by Credo, which tells of how the ancient Africans used to kill the Chitauri by sharpening a poisonous type of wood called rhodesia, tick wood, into a stake. They would then pound these stakes into the hearts of the reptilians. Since the Chitauri also drank human blood, it becomes obvious the stories of Dracula are descended from this time period. The relations to pictures of the devil and the fact that the reptilians set up all religions makes it clear that they were setting us up. In horror movies, the victim often brandishes a cross to shield himself from the evil. You will see later how the cross is nothing more than a pagan adaptation of the cross of the zodiac. It is also no wonder why the Egyptian pharaohs all had long beards under their chins and wore python-looking hats. They were mimicking the reptilians. There are also stories of African kings who could shapeshift. In one instance, the peoples of a certain village were afraid of their king because one day witnesses saw him turn into a lion in his home. Credo believes that there is a certain blind spot in our brains, a blind spot which the education system and the religions exploit. Most people will see something completely out of the ordinary and disregard it altogether as part of their reality. Vaccines given to children inhibit their ability to see spiritual entities, and it is forcibly impressed upon the public to ridicule those who see UFOs or experience interactions with disincarnate entities. It is no mystery all the ancient civilizations worship the python and why there are an unaccountable number of references to extraterrestrial gods in religious texts and ancient historical documents. It is Credo's belief that the Chitauri will soon reveal themselves. We have all been so blind as to destroy the environment and ourselves, and now the reptilian gods will come and try to appear as saviors. Most people who are bathed in ignorance will either accept it or be scared into submission. Either way, the mind of the reptilians will be imposed on our society again unless human beings begin to stand up for themselves. The reptilians in Zulu lore brought the moon here many centuries ago. Two brothers called by Credo, Wuwani and Umpanku, piloted the holocraft. The reptilians that control the earth live inside the moon, just as they live inside the earth. Wuwani and Umpanku were Enki and Enlil, the two sons of Anu, chief commander of Nibiru. Enki and Enlil were the chief patrons of the Anunnaki described in the Sumerian tablets. According to the Zulu shamans, Wuwani and Umpanku were also known as the water brothers because they had scaly skin like a fish. This is where the legend of the fish god Dagon comes from, and the concept in our economic system known as maritime amorality law. The Pope represents Dagon. He dons the mitre, and he is of pure reptilian bloodline connected to the ancient bloodlines of Nimrod in Babylon and the Hyksos in Egypt. It is perhaps time we rewrote our history. Namaste, namaskaram. Live long and prosper.